So I saw two programs on Netflix recently that touched me deeply as a parent, first and foremost. I'm sure a lot of people have seen or heard of adolescence. And it's a culture that is, unfortunately, with the internet age and all, I'm sure it's more worldwide than just speaks to a worldwide audience rather than, the assumption that it only happens in, this side of, in the West. The other program that I just completed, um, left me a bit more. I'm not comparing because they're actually two separate issues. I've not had time to even look at both of them side by side. But this other one is the reason why I decided to make this very quick video. Hopefully, it'll be a very quick one because I just had to say something. The title is unbelievable. Not sure how many have. Unlike Adolescence that was made here in UK, Unbelievable is an American program on Netflix. So if you haven't seen or heard of it and you want to have a better understanding, you can go ahead and watch. But I will, I was going to say I'll give you a caveat, but this is a caveat right now. This video is a caveat. Nobody gives us caveats when we're born. We don't get the memo that life will happen. It just happens. So when you hear people come on to tell you their stories to help you navigate, to help you understand, and if you cannot understand, at least you can be human and empathize. Don't discard those messages. For me, this particular video, I am directing it particularly to my Nigerian people. I'm Nigerian. I grew up in Lagos and I'm a woman and I have been following recent news and stories, from Senator Natasha, to is it Dr. Ezekwesili? I beg your pardon. Please do not come for me. The lady with the short hair and glasses. I don't know these people. I don't know them, but they are like me. I am like them. We are women. We have that one thing in common. And I saw another skit recently. I was fortunately enough, it was a man who did this. Was a young guy, and he said, we hate women in Nigeria. I think it was one of the reasons why if I got hired as a woman in Nigeria. But today is not for that, really. I don't want to go into that. I have done a lot of thinking, and I still am thinking a lot as a Nigerian, and one who has stood back from being part of the issues just to assess it. And I have judged myself first. So I'm not pointing fingers here. I'm saying for as many people who have tried to think about what the issues are in Nigeria and whether or not we're doing enough or what exactly is going on in that country. This is the question that a lot of people ask, but I feel like the majority are not asking this question because they really want a true answer. It's become a rhetorical question, just to express how exhausted and frustrated people are with the situation in Nigeria. So I don't want to deviate. I'm going to go back to Unbelievable. Unbelievable is a story about a young girl, and spoiler alert. So if you don't like to know about things before you watch them, you may want to stop now, because I'm going to have to go into a few details to explain why I had to do a video. Unbelievable is a story about a young girl. I don't know if I could call her an orphan, but she certainly did not have family. So this was a girl that has been passed on from foster home to foster home. She was currently living in some kind of shelter home for kids, because I think she was a teenager, and she got raped. So yes, that's what this video is about. She got raped inside her own apartment, inside her own room. Her accommodation was a dormitory style, kind of. So of course there was meetings afterwards, because it was not the just even explaining this seems funny. Not funny, haha, but be awkward. Calling it an unusual rape. What rape is usual? Sleeping and suddenly waking up to find herself, her mouth covered and her hands tied to her back, and totally helpless. So can't scream, can't do anything. The person did what they would do and took pictures and cleaned up. So there was no trace. There was no evidence other than the bruises on her, and her word and her trauma. And I think it's the trauma part that drove me to this, to making this video. You see, there's something about trauma when you have been through this sort of situation, and I'm trying not to generalize here because there are different sorts of trauma. But when you've been through abuse of this nature, you can recognize them. The program touched on a number of things, and one of the things that I appreciated about the program was the fact that she had two foster mothers who had similar experience, and their response to the trauma was quite different from this girl's response to trauma. So it left them baffled. The initial response was support, but I guess because this girl was dazed, like, this is not going to a club and, getting, it's the kind of day, is a day's rape. Like, you were sleeping in your bed, in your own, where you would call your corner your safe place, and violated. At some point, she thought maybe she dreamt it. There was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of numbness. And because when the police were called, she was asked several questions. And unfortunately, because the police couldn't find evidence, and I must say at this point, the police that were, the person assigned to her was of a different gender, was of a gender, was a male. Let me just say it was male. Not just that he was male, he had the average male reaction. Where's the evidence? And if there's no evidence, okay, let's start checking about this victim and see what we can pull off of the victim. Because you see, a woman will suddenly wake up one day and accuse somebody that she doesn't even know about of raping her. I mean, it's one thing if you point out, if you know who your assailant was and you're able to point them out. It's another thing entirely when you were violated by someone you cannot even identify if they stood in front of you, other than maybe their voice or their smell or things like that. You see, And so this police officer, rather than complete due diligence and empathize with this girl, he went ahead to dissect her and pull up history about her past. This was a young girl, remember? So pull up history about, how, maybe she was just looking for attention and that was why. And so he prodded her so much that making suggestions that maybe she thought it up, he made her repeat herself several times and trying to look out for details. They're not matching up and all that. But he didn't look for the possibility. He did not look for. He just sat with this girl and came to a conclusion. And this girl, what I noticed and what broke my heart throughout watching this program was the fact that this particular girl was alone throughout. She was alone. She had never committed a crime before. This had never happened to her before. She wasn't knowledgeable nor experienced in what to expect, in how to present one's thoughts, or how to report it. Sometimes I think people really don't think deep enough how rape, I'm just going to call it what it is, how rape affects people. Rape and sexual molestation. It's one crime against another human where the victim is the one who suffers the shame, the doubt, and the victim is the one who has to prove that a crime was committed against them. I don't have an answer for this. I don't have a solution. I don't. But I wish that people will be more empathetic towards someone who's been a victim of rape and sexual assault. I wish that people will show more empathy. And above all, I wish that people will stop victim blaming or looking for holes. Yes, it's true. There have been instances where some silly woman has made claims just so. But I can assure you that there are more live incidences that have occurred than those few silly people who have made unfounded claims. But the devastation that follows a woman after such an experience, it's not trivial. It stays with a life and has the ability and power to affect many more through that one life, and affecting many more badly, adversely, depending on how the situation is handled. One of the things that I wanted to, I'm not sure how many people have been able to come out and talk about this openly, but one of the things that I need to let people understand is that when someone has been violated and taken through, touched all over, and things done to them without their consent, the first feeling of violation is the fact that what did I do? What did I do to deserve this? Did I do something wrong to make this person think it was okay to do what they did to me? And so the victim carries this guilt that for some unknown reason, it's their fault. That a man would decide to ignore another person's right to sovereignty and individualism and break that. It's not a reaction. It's a lack of control, and it's evil. So let's stop victim blaming. That's number one. Number two, if a person comes to you and even opens up, it's a huge step. Because guess what? The shame oftentimes doesn't allow the victim to open up. In recent times, I've just been thinking about that woman that was almost stoned to death, the one they called the adulterer or the adulteress, and Jesus was there, and they were like, according to the law of blah, 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 blah. How dare you call somebody an adulteress? Does it not take two to make that happen? Where is the man? I've been thinking about this so much, even before I watched this movie of late, and I thought, we're still doing this. We're still picking up stones, and it's affecting largely women, and we need to stop. You can't call yourself human and still do that. If you're listening to me And the first thing that's coming to your mind is, oh, well, the person should have known better. The person shouldn't have done. Please, you need to check yourself. Are you human? You really need to check yourself. Rape is not something people call to themselves. It's something the person, the perpetrator, did because they lack control and they lack respect for another human being. And it's time to start calling it what it is. My plea today is that if you're in a position, if your child comes to you, if your niece comes to you, if you're a mother or a father, a brother or sister, an auntie, an uncle, a colleague, can you just be human? You know, good human? Because really, evil is in all of us. Unless for those who submit themselves to God, evil is in all of us. So sometimes even saying someone is not human, I wonder, really. We are all human and we all still commit all these things. I would ask you to please empathize. I would ask you to please take this seriously until proven otherwise. I would ask you to take note of the person, of the reporter, of the victim. Not everybody cries after an assault. Some people internalize. Some people ignore. This girl in this program ended up confirming to the police officer after so much disbelief from them that, okay, she was lying, she made it up. Why? Because she was tired and she just wanted it all to end. But guess what? It didn't end. They went ahead and they booked her in for false reporting. At the end of the day, thankfully, it still worked out for her. But that was because a set of women from another state entirely worked on the cases that this guy had committed in other places. And then they found out all his victims, and this girl happened to be one of them. Women are the most vulnerable to this, to rape. I know there are men, I am certain that there are men who have gone through this, and I am not discarding them or their experience. And they deserve as much if they would ever speak up. But then for someone to speak up, there has to be someone who would listen. If you're a parent and your child comes to you and reports someone who is under your roof, be a responsible parent. That person must not last that day under your roof. The first job that you have on this earth as a parent is towards your children. God entrusted them into your hands. I don't care who that person is, but they must not spend the night in that house. Protecting your children comes first. If eventually it turns out not to be true, that's another case entirely. Sort it out. But at the moment, protect your children. If someone comes to you and reports it, have a heart. Empathize. The fact that you've never experienced it or that you've never had a man do this to you, my dear, it doesn't mean that you are a saint and that you have done so right in life and that's why bad things have not happened to you. No, it isn't. Show empathy. Protect the vulnerable. If you have the power to, do so. Find justice for them if it's within your reach. It matters a lot to me because not only am I a survivor on multiple occasions, I have had a close relative open up to me. And when I believed this relative, I was powerless to do anything because this was long after. And I could understand because some of the things that happened to me when I was younger, I never told anybody. And the day I told my mom, I was already a mother myself. So I could understand the helplessness because I saw it in my mom and I had to hug her and explain to her that I'm fine. But I had to explain to you why I take decisions about my child and do the things that I do. Listen, I had parents that I told who did not believe. I wasn't the parent, but they didn't believe. And at that point, I couldn't understand. How do you tell a parent this happened to their child and they wouldn't believe? I'll tell you one of the common things. There could be others. Because like I said before, there's no set way that people react to trauma. But you can be sure of some things. The change in attitude of a person. The person may end up behaving in manners in which they've never behaved before. And it's confusing to you. Listen, I know for Nigerians, we like to make everything behavioral. Not everything is behavioral. All right? Be curious enough to ask questions and be curious enough to find out more beyond what you have been told verbally. Listen to what you have not been told as well. Be patient. Be patient. Be protective. Let protection be ahead of you trying to discipline anybody. It isn't. It's got nothing to do with discipline. All right? Let protection be your first to go to. Trust your gut. Hopefully, if you have a good one, trust your gut. For me, I live with the fact that at some point, I didn't trust my gut enough. I trusted the parents who didn't believe that it happened. And then I lost the trust of the victim who had told me because they trusted me enough to understand. Trust your gut. You may be the only person that person would have. It's a lonely place to be. Victim will always have suicidal thoughts. That one is universal. There will always be suicidal thoughts and attempts. Keep a close watch. Erratic behaviors. One often behavior that you would see is the victim reacting either violently or timidly to the opposite gender, like flinching to touch, even if it's a touch from their uncle or dad or whoever, as long as the person is of the gender that assaulted them.